Welcome to Speak Out, Stand Out by Green Communications, where we're learning how to help our kids become better communicators. We believe our voices are the strongest asset we have, and our mission is to empower the next generation to use their voices to make a difference in the world around them. Whether you are a parent, an educator, or are just invested in today's youth, we hope this podcast will help you build confidence in our future, one voice at a time.
Welcome back to Speak Out, Stand Out. I'm Elizabeth Green, and today's guest is Aisha Nyer. Aisha is an early years teacher, parent coach, educator, and mom of three. And she coaches parents on how to cope with their young children's big emotions and boundary testing behavior with the goal of building strong relationships. And that is what we're all about here at Speak Out, Stand Out, is building communication skills in our children so that we can have those strong relationships and they can go on to have strong relationships with others. So Aisha, really glad to have you. Thanks for taking your time today.
Hi, Elizabeth. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me onto the show.
Before we dive in, tell us just a little bit about how did you get to where this is your focus and this is what you teach?
So I used to be a teacher in a nursery, and then I used to run a nursery department in international schools. And I always had parents at my door. And I think because it was, their kids' first year at school usually, so they were every day with questions, trying to ask for advice on behavior issues, etc. So I kind of feel like I've been coaching parents unofficially for years and years and years. And I always thought that, it's so, I'm not going to say easy, because I never thought it was easy, but I just felt like I had a lot of advice to give and a lot to say. And obviously built great relationships with parents that I used to work with. But then I became a parent myself, and I was just hit with this realization that, oh my God, I don't know anything. But more importantly, just the feeling of isolation and loneliness sometimes. And I realized how little support there is for parents. And that made me realize why those parents were always at my door. As, I was just their kid's teacher. I didn't sort of know about things that they, necessarily, it wasn't my profession to kind of give that advice. But I realized that they just don't have anyone else to talk to. And I found that when I became a parent, I was like, there isn't anywhere to kind of, I just want this question answered, and there's nobody to ask and nobody to tell me what to do. So I then started running baby and mom, or baby and parent, and toddler and parent play groups where I lived in Prague at the time. And that became that sort of community where I was kind of teaching parents what I know and what I read, what I experienced about child development, raising children in a, healthy, respectful, conscious way. And they would come and ask questions, and we'd have, amazing discussions. I ran workshops for parents, usually for expecting or new parents, on how to start this right from birth, how to, have this in your, how build that sort of relationship with your baby right from the start. And then obviously, pandemic story, I guess everybody's got a pandemic story. I started doing all of that. I tried to do a bit more online because we couldn't meet in person. So I've had a few clients that I've worked with online, and I have had a membership group, some course groups, etc. So yeah, that's sort of how I've ended up here. I've got 3 kids. My eldest is 6, and I've got twins who are 4. So that was also quite a ride when they were born. And
I'm sure.
Newborn twins and a 2-year-old was definitely one of the most challenging things. But yeah, it was, something that we got through, and I'm just going to kind of start, if you don't mind, because it sort of flows in nicely. That everything that I have learned and everything that I've taught parents, it all boils down to two things. It's the relationship that you have with your child, and the extremely important foundation of that is how you communicate. So we just always come back to communication. And I think it's such a fundamental part of any relationship, and that includes the relationship that we have with our children and how we communicate with them, how we speak to them, how they learn from us how to communicate with others. Just all feeds into, how we are with them, and whether or not we have, difficulties and challenges, which there always are. But through communication, you can help yourself and help your child get through those challenges. So
yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's so important not only that we build those foundations with them so we protect our relationship, but what they learn from us in these early stages, this is going to go on with them throughout their entire lives. And
absolutely.
so much of it, like you said, it does. The foundation is always on communication. So you talk about, and one of the things you coach on is how to really get through the big emotions, right? So whether they're toddlers and they're so frustrated because they can't get their shoe on, right? Or it's a teenager that's frustrated because they have a curfew earlier than they'd like, right? It all is the same, just different scenarios. So what are your strategies and number one tips for dealing with those scenarios?
So number one is, and I'm going to kind of start maybe from a point you might not expect, but number one is making sure that you as a parent feel content and calm. Calm is a phrase that, we use a lot, but sometimes you can't stay calm. So I don't want you to feel, as a parent, I don't want you to feel the pressure that you have to always be calm, but I like to use grounded. So whenever I either anticipate or see my kids kind of, becoming frustrated, or I can see that there's going to be a boundary that they're not going to be happy about, I make sure that myself, either before I set that boundary or before I approach them, if they are frustrated or angry or whatever, that I take, sometimes it's 10 seconds, sometimes it's a minute, to ground myself so that I go into that scenario able to help them, rather than joining in the chaos, joining in with the frustration and anger and madness. I'm not saying it always works perfectly, because we all know that real life is, very different. But if I can manage that, and if you can manage that, find something that grounds you as a parent and take that time. I've had moments where I can hear my 6-year-old, whining about something or complaining. And before I go to speak to her, I remember sort of standing at the fridge, and I opened the fridge to get something, and I heard her voice, and I felt my frustration rising. And I stood there at that fridge with the door open, and just took that 20 seconds to kind of focus myself and think about, what do I want? When I go and speak to her, what do I want her to feel, and what do I want to get out of this? And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to get into an argument, so let's, calm my own nerves, calm my own self, and then close the fridge door. And then I went to speak to her. So number one is really being aware of how you're feeling in that moment as a parent. And I really know that it's not always possible to kind of take that time. If it's a sibling argument, or if it's something dangerous is happening, you have to step in right away. But if you remember, then it really, really helps.
And I was just going to add too, I think you're right. It is so much easier said than done, especially in the moment. Yeah. But this has been a commonality of a lot of parent experts that I've spoken with have stressed the importance of this. And so for me personally, that has, in the moment, it's still a struggle, right? But it's also made me realize, do I have to have this conversation right now? Or can I hold off and have this conversation at a later time when we're both calm? And I go into it with a full focus and like you said, know what I want them to experience from the conversation, what I want them to learn, but also feel from it. And if you step away from a little bit, it's so much easier to do. But like you said, not always feasible at the time. Sometimes we have to address it right then. But that little bit alone has desperately helped me as a parent. So
Definitely. And also, you know, especially with older children where they are more verbal. And I guess, you know, with little ones, it's often, you know, something that they might be throwing or trying to hit a sibling or whatever. With older ones, you know, you might still have like these physical reactions, but it tends to be a lot more verbal. So you can, you know, maybe the danger isn't that immediate. So you can take a step away and, you know, say to them, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. I just need a couple of minutes. Can we just meet again in 5 minutes or something like that? And they, you know, they might, you know, again, they might not necessarily be thrilled about it, but it's better for everybody rather than coming into an argument and just having that, you know, high emotions, high flying everywhere.
Right.
So yeah, definitely you can do that. And then when you do go in, I think we often assume a lot as parents. We step into a situation and we think that, and I don't mean this in, you know, I do the same. I don't mean it to sort of mean this in any kind of judgmental way, but, you know, as adults, we always tend to think that we have the solution, that we are right, that we know what's going on, right?
Right.
So sometimes it's just good to have a little bit of a reality check and pass that on to your child, and just kind of, instead of approaching the situation with, right, I'm going to solve this, I know what we're going to do here, just approach it and be a little bit curious and see, okay, what is going on? And if it's, you know, if it's an older child, ask them a question first, like, what's going on? I really, really like the opening question, like if something is happening with older children that are more verbal, to first ask them, like, do you need my help? Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to just listen? Because very, very often as well, and this applies to younger children as well, sometimes they just want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, communication, it's as much about listening as it is talking. So let them say what they want to say first. If it is, you know, a boundary that you've said, like, you know, like you said, a curfew, or they've, you know, not allowed to go and see their friends, or their screen time is finished and they are frustrated about it, let them express that and tell you what's bothering them, and be a listener and hear them out. Because often, again, you know, and this comes from a good place, because they're our children and we want to help them. You know, that's our job. It's kind of our entire life role, is to help our kids and, you know, make sure they're not unhappy, and we want them to be happy, etc. But sometimes we can just override what they're feeling and what they're trying to express by our assumptions and our sort of responses. Feeling heard just helps with everything. And I know personally, you know, when I'm bothered about something and I go and tell my boyfriend about it, and he starts being like, oh, well, did you think about this? And what about this? And what about this? And I'm just like, I don't want to listen. I don't want you to tell me what to do. I just want you to listen to me vent and listen to me rant.
Yes.
And kids need that as well. So giving them the chance to express themselves. And, you know, with older ones, and I find this, you know, my 6-year-old is kind of really, she's actually almost 7. She's really getting into this. And I don't like the phrase sassy, but just, you know, like the language and the attitude and the tone and everything, trying not to take that personally. And if they are responding to you in a way that you feel a bit uncomfortable with, be honest. Say, well, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I don't really like how you're speaking to me right now. So can you try a different way? Or if not, maybe we need a little break and let's come back to this. And maybe you need a little break and I need a little break. Let's come back to this conversation in 10 minutes. So I think without shaming and blaming and like, how dare you speak to me like that? And, you know, how just kind of being that, you know, that sort of, I don't know how to call it, like traditional or I guess aggressive conversationalist. Be more understanding but honest, but have boundaries as well that are personal and safe to you.
Right.
Like, I don't like how you're speaking to me right now. let's come back to this in a minute, or can you try again? Can you try saying that again? And I will say this to my 6-year-old, I say this to my 4-year-old, and I've said this when they were 2 as well, when they've been either shouting at me or crying. And I say, I'm sorry, I would like to help you, and I'm here to listen to you. But if they're whining or something, I can't really understand what you're saying. So please, can you try again? Okay, let's see giving them a chance to tell you what they need to say. Yeah.
And I just really wanted to back up to what you were saying about that importance of letting them talk. When, I'm the same exact way when I'm complaining or venting about something, you don't want somebody to fix it. You just want sometimes to be able to vent. And a lot of times, especially if our kids are younger, who else do they have to vent to? It's us. So we need to respect that. I say all the time in our debate classes, the reason why they are so successful and so popular is because that's all it is a chance for the kids to speak and be heard. That's all it is, right? And it's amazing how it transforms them to be able to have people really focus on what they're saying. Because, in the day-to-day, our conversations are always interrupted or we're doing other things.
Yeah.
So to kind of get that attention and being able to carve out that time for our kids when we feel like they need it. And then for me, too, the hard part is if they say, I don't want to talk, walking away, and accepting that, too. I think that's hard, but so important.
Yeah. And I think, those skills also, that teaches them about their emotions and how to cope with them and how to express them appropriately. That's all skills that they are going to need when they're adults to be able to figure out what they're feeling and how to cope with it and how to deal with it. So talking things through and giving them that space to feel confident enough to talk about it. There's so many of us, and myself included, when I feel something, I just shut down and I just won't say a word. And I find it very, very hard to share anything because a lot of us have been, brought up where in environments where, we are told to stop crying or don't make a fuss, or, you're making a big deal out of nothing. And why are you so mad? It's, you shouldn't be mad. And we've been raised and taught to shut down our emotions. So now as adults, we find it very difficult to deal with them. And, everybody's in therapy and everybody needs help. So allowing our children to work through those feelings and learn about them. And they can't learn about them if they don't experience them. And they need to experience them in a safe space with a person who is there to support them through it, because it's that those emotions are really big and strong, and they can be quite scary sometimes as well for kids. So giving them that security and safety to be able to express themselves and have the confidence that they've got this space to say what they want to. And to what I had a moment with the twins where I'm not going to get into details, but they were just like messing something up, and I actually I raised my voice, I shouted, and after a while they came up to me and they said, you need to say that you're sorry for shouting at us. And and I was like, of course I did, and I apologized genuinely. But the fact that they had the confidence to tell me that, I thought that was quite amazing as well, that they felt that, this is a situation where people apologize and they don't feel afraid. They feel confident enough to come to me and say, we feel like we need an apology from you. And then obviously we talked about it, but just so having that relationship where your child is not afraid to be 100% them and tell you 100% what they need from you, even if you feel a little bit like, oh yes, I'm in the wrong, but they've got that confidence to kind of call you out on it. And I think I actually feel that's really, really beautiful, and that's a relationship that's going to last a lifetime. So
and if they don't ever see us apologize to things, how can we expect them to do it?
How can they learn? Yeah.
Exactly. If we're like, no, I don't owe you an apology, then all we're doing is teaching them to respond the same. So that's amazing. I love it.
And it definitely works because, apart from all the regular sibling arguments, I have heard them, genuinely apologize to each other without me saying anything. And when that happens, oh my gosh, my heart just explodes when that happens. So yeah, it's modeling is, you can never underestimate how important it is, actually, how they pick up everything that you do.
Yeah.
So I'll just go back to, we ground ourselves, we let our child speak, and we then, so they feel heard. And the next step is to validate their feelings or emotions, to show them that, yes, we have really listened and we have really heard. And it's really easy to do, but also you have to kind of, it takes practice for sure. Everything takes practice. And as a parent, you know, we're all learning all the time. We're learning new things every day. I always say to the parents that I work with, like, we're always learning. I'm learning how to be a parent of a 6.5-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Right.
And next year I'm going to be learning how to be a parent of a 7-year-old. And then I'm going to be learning how to be a parent of a 10-year-old. So we're always
Right.
learning. But what was I saying? Sorry.
No, so after we make sure we're grounded, then we give them an opportunity to speak, and then we validate them.
Yeah, we validate their feelings. And this can look like, you know, for let's say a 2 or 1.5 or toddler who is just completely falling apart because they wanted the green cup and you've given them the blue cup. And our instinct is to kind of dismiss, to be like, oh, you know, what's the big deal? It's just the cup. The green cup's dirty. You can use this one. We'll have the green cup later, blah. And just like, we kind of try and justify and explain. And that just keeps the wheel spinning, that, you know, those emotions, and that they still feel unsatisfied. They still feel disappointed, etc. Whilst if we can just validate what they're feeling, wow, you're really disappointed. You wanted to use your green cup and it's not available. And then just zip it. Once you've said to them, I find it's like, you have that at the tip of your tongue where you want to explain and be like, oh, but the green cup's in the dishwasher. Just zip it. Just say to them, show them that you understand. And with an older child, I know how upset you are. You really wanted to go and see your friend today. And I said no. And I understand that you're mad about that. And zip it.
And done.
There's no need to justify. There's no need to kind of explain yourself. It's not about us kind of being in this position where, oh, we need to justify what we're doing. It's about us being the parent who has confidently set a boundary, and we are accepting our child's disappointment. They're allowed to feel disappointed. Yeah. And we validate that disappointment for them. We show them that we are understanding of how they're feeling. And, you know, we keep the boundary because this is what we've decided for whatever reason. You know, you're the parent, you have to keep them safe, etc. And, you know, again, same with a teenager, you know, there's a lot of, and in a really, really good and positive way, I mean this in a good way, there are a lot of similarities between communicating with toddlers and teenagers in that, of course, I understand that the situations are very, very different and much more complex. But if we can extend that same, you know, validation and acceptance to a teenager's feelings as we do to a toddler's feelings, you know, that line of communication opens up. And yes, they might storm off. Yes, they might, you know, shout something at us that we don't like. But we remember that it's not personal. It's just them expressing themselves in the way that they know, and they're learning. They're still learning, you know, even though they're as tall as us or sometimes even taller, they're still learning, and our role is still to guide them at that point.
Yeah.
So
I love what you said about, like, and this is the hardest part for me too, is just stopping, you know, like when you said, just stop. Like, I understand you're upset about this. Stop. Right. Like, I mean, and like stopping yourselves, that is so hard for me, but it makes so much sense when you say it. Like the example you gave, it sounded like the conversation was over. Whereas if you'd gone on with, but you can't use it because of this reason or whatever, it just opens up a room for them to respond. So that makes a ton of sense. That's
almost
really great.
like just opens up just this power, room for another power struggle and negotiations, and you just keep going. Whereas if you can, and I don't mean, in like a mean or strict voice, but just a confident voice and a calm voice, you state the boundary, and then you show them that you understand that they're feeling upset about it or disappointed about it. And, you can accept and acknowledge and validate their feelings, and you can hold the boundary as well.
Yeah.
So, like it is a skill. It's definitely something that I had to learn as a parent. And, I've sort of been practicing for years now. And I have to admit that I do find it a bit harder with my older, the older my daughter gets, because all these expectations come into my head as well. And I'm thinking, well, she's old enough. She should know that. She shouldn't, argue with me like that. But when I get all those thoughts in my head and I give in to them, then again, it just continues and an argument happens and all that. Whereas if I can really see it as, she's still learning all these skills and I'm still here to support her. And my role as the parent is to stay grounded and not get caught up in these power struggles and arguments. My role as a parent is to make sure everybody's safe with whatever limits I've decided or boundaries I've decided. But then also giving them the space to express themselves, because I am that safe space for them. Yeah.
Well, I love it. And I love step-by-step processes. So that makes it so much easier to remember, right? Make sure we're grounded, give them the opportunity to speak, and set our boundaries and zip it. Right?
And validate their feelings.
And validate, of course. Yeah.
That's I think that's probably one of the most powerful parenting tools, if I can call it that. And I with my toddlers, I would sort of see them, like their bodies would like have this physical relief when they were crying about something, and I would just say back to them, yeah, you really wanted to play with that thing and it's not available, someone else has it, or you really, really wanted that thing. And they kind of just go into this like, yes, and just, collapse in relief that finally someone understands that I understood what they were upset about. And the thing is, I'm sure if you've ever had a toddler, you also know that trying to give them the thing that they want, that they're upset about, that never actually really solves the tantrum. It never really helps, right? Because it's really not about the thing. It's more about the feelings and allowing those feelings to be. And I think it definitely applies to our older kids. And then, again, with our older kids, more verbal kids, we can have a conversation about it later, either in the evening, once everybody's calm, once we're having a nice cuddle, if it's something that you feel needs bringing up again, but without the heat of the emotions, just have, open it up again. Be like, hey, I saw that you were like so upset earlier about this. Do you want to tell me more about that? Or do you want to have another chat about it? Do you need any help with anything? So giving them the opportunity to process it again, if it's something that's recurring, or if it's something that you notice that, they always get upset about switching off the screen, or you can never really have, there's something that you always end up in arguments about. And another way, so I'm kind of going a little bit off topic, but is involving them in the boundary making process, in setting the boundaries, involving them, appropriate to their age, and having a conversation, communicating with them about it. How would you feel if your boss comes to you and just says, hey, you need to work extra 3 hours every Friday from now on, done, and walks out of the room? Or versus your boss comes into you and says, listen, we've got this big project coming up. I need like extra hours from you. How can we make this work? So same with your teen, I'm the parent. I feel like an hour and a half or whatever, like an hour of screen time a day is a good and healthy amount. What can we do? How can we agree on this boundary to help you stick to this boundary? And then if you find that there are, after the hours coming up, there's always a lot of feelings, always a lot of upset, revisit it, communicate again. Like, we agreed that an hour is a healthy amount, but you're finding it really hard to switch off. Like, what could we do to help you? Do you need a reminder 15 minutes before? Do you need, a reminder half an hour into the time so that you can switch what you're doing? So yeah, communicating. Everything comes back to communication.
Absolutely. And it's not negotiating either.
Yeah.
It is, it is just communicating about this is the boundary. How can we help you, meet these things? So I think that's fantastic. And, often we don't speak to children like we speak to adults, and we shouldn't for a lot of reasons. However, in some cases not in some cases, in a roundabout way, we should, like, if I wouldn't say it to an adult, then I probably shouldn't say it to my kid either, or use like you just used the example with the boss coming in, right? It's the same scenario. You want to treat him with respect too.
Exactly. And I think that's it. Some people get like all ruffled up when you say you should speak to children in the same way you should to adults. When of course, when we say that, it just means extend them the same respect that you would any other human being, because they are also a human being.
Exactly. You said it so much better than me. That's exactly what I meant. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Aisha, this has been really, really helpful. Again, I love the simple step approach. That makes it easy to remember and easier to implement, and something I'm certainly working on myself. So you offer coaching and lots of other, things. So we will, of course, put all of your links in the show notes so everybody can access you. And if they're interested in working more with you to dive into these things even more and on a more personal level, you're available, right?
Yes, I'm available.
All right, awesome. Well, you'll be able to. Go ahead.
I also have a podcast. It's called Trusting Children Podcast, so you can search for that as well. It is geared mainly towards younger kids, but the information in there can definitely be applied to older kids as well.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll definitely link to that as well. So feel free to, or definitely follow her podcast, and feel free to reach out to her on her socials and through her website if you'd like to chat with Aisha more. So thank you again for your time and your insight. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I've had a really lovely conversation with you. Thanks for having me.
Me too. Thank you.
If you are looking for more ways to build communication skills in your kids, grab our free mini lesson on how to craft a polished and professional speech out of thin air, along with 52 fun prompts so your kids can practice every single week. You can find that along with info about our upcoming public speaking and debate courses for kids at greencommunicationsedu.com.